Hi everyone, it's Carolyn from True Crime Chat with Mommy Ramblings, and you might remember we've covered a little bit of this case when it first started, when Jespy went missing, and then when her husband was arrested. So we're going to talk about this Colorado man, Dane Kallungi, and we have a new affidavit that's out, which we're going to go through. That's going to be very interesting because he actually confesses to his first wife over a casual lunch conversation that he did indeed murder his second wife, Jespy. So let's take a look at what's going on here because it's quite the case. And again, out of Colorado. Little background is that Jespy met Dane Kallungi on a dating website. She moved from her country, the Philippines, to the United States to marry Dane in 2017. They were married in July of 2017, and they lived in Colorado. We can fast forward to March 20th of 2019. When Jespy's mother, Margie Amaga, who lives in Hong Kong, became concerned because her daughter just suddenly stopped replying to texts in a Facebook Messenger, that they were having together. She has never again seen or heard from her daughter since March 20th, 2019. Okay? Some court records show that there was a filing for divorce, but it was unclear if the divorce was ever finalized. And it's believed that Dane moved to San Diego shortly after Jespy went missing. The affidavit has some very interesting and disturbing information that we're going to go through. Now let's learn that earlier this month, Dane was arrested in New Mexico, and he was then booked into the El Paso County Jail. So we'll go through all of that, and we're going to hear all about this conversation in which he admits to killing his wife, Jespy, to his ex-wife, first wife. All right, so let's take a look at what's happening. Before we do that, you'll see this is a booking for him, and it's age 38. He was born in 1982. Okay, his booking date is June 17th, 2021, and you'll see that he is charged with murder in the first degree, felony murder, and there was a transfer on 6/28/2021 to another facility, so he was released to the other agency. Okay, let's go on to this affidavit. Okay, so here's the affidavit. District County Court, El Paso County, Colorado, and this is the people of the state of Colorado versus Kallungi Dan Oliver, and his date of birth is 12/23/1982, age 38. Following affidavit is submitted to the court to document the probable cause in support of a request for the issuance of an arrest warrant for Kallungi Dane Oliver, date of birth 12/23/1982, age 38, Social Security number redacted. The offense is fully documented in Colorado Springs Police Department report, gives the report number, detailing the offense of murder in the first degree, class 1 felony, with the victim identified as Kallungi Jespy Alaine Amaga, date of birth 11/25/1992, age 28, gender female, race Asian. Your affiant, Detective Michael Lee, sworn police officer with the City of Colorado Springs, currently assigned to the homicide unit herein after referred to as I. I have personal knowledge of the details concerning this investigation, which are documented in Colorado Springs Police Department report number, gives the report number again, titled Murder in the First Degree. Unless Otherwise noted, all addresses listed in this affidavit are located in the city of Colorado Springs, county of El Paso, and state of Colorado. On April 4th, 2019, at 12:38 hours, officers with the Colorado Springs Police Department were dispatched to 1930 LaSalle Street, apartment number 203 of the Alaine Kallungi Apartments, to check the welfare of Jespy Kallungi, date of birth 11/25/1992. The reporting party, Alaine Leopold, placed the call from the state of Alaska, stating that she has not been able to contact Jespy since March 20th of 2019. Officers did not make contact with Jespy. Officers spoke with management, who stated that Jespy has not been seen in weeks. Now, Ms. Leopold is a longtime friend of Jespy Kallungi. They have known each other since high school. It's unusual for them not to talk on a regular basis. Ms. Leopold is concerned that Jespy is injured or possibly deceased. And while looking at the premise history, a law enforcement contacts, officers saw 4 separate calls for service dating back to March 28th, 2019. During each call for service, no contact was ever made with Jespy. So there's Colorado Springs Police Department to check the welfare calls to 1930 East LaSalle Street, number 203, and there were calls on March 28th, March 30th, April 1st, April 4th, April 4th, April 4th, and no contact was ever made with Jespy. April 4th, 2019, detailed Jespy's husband, Dane Kallungi, a former military and has access to weapons. Officer Mathis responded to the most recent call for service. Officer Mathis spoke to the reporting party, Alaine Leopold, by phone and learned that Jespy was recently separated from her husband. Ms. Leopold told Officer Mathis it is unusual for Jespy to disappear without telling anyone, as she frequently makes contact by phone and is active on Facebook. Jespy has not posted on Facebook for the last several weeks and has not made contact with family or friends. Officer Mathis placed a phone call to Dane Kallungi to inquire about the whereabouts of Jespy. Mr. Kallungi told Officer Mathis he was out of state visiting his father. Mr. Kallungi told Officer Mathis Jespy left on Wednesday, March 27, 2019, to go visit a friend named Gina. Mr. Kallungi said that he has not heard from Jespy since, and Mr. Kallungi said that he has no idea where Jespy is because she left him due to marital problems. Officer Mathis said Mr. Kallungi was nervous during their conversation. Officer Mathis described Mr. Kallungi as being unconcerned about the whereabouts of his wife. Officer Mathis made multiple calls to contact Jespy by phone. Each attempt went directly to personal voicemail, with Jespy identifying herself by name. Officer Mathis has received no return phone calls. Officer Mathis again spoke with Ms. Leopold, who told him that Jespy has a good friend named Gina in Chicago. This Gina may be the person that Mr. Kallungi was referring to. Officer Mathis obtained Gina's phone number from Ms. Leopold. Officer Mathis called Gina, who told him that she was not expecting Jespy and has not spoken to Jespy since March 20th of 2019. Gina told Officer Mathis that Mr. Kallungi had made threats to impede Jespy's efforts to gain U.S. citizenship in order to control her behavior. Multiple friends of Jespy called police on April 4th, 2019, concerned for Jespy's safety. One phone call was from Jespy's mother in Hong Kong, who mentioned possible domestic violence. Jespy's mother also stated that she has not heard from Jespy in weeks, which is unusual. On October 4th of 2019, I contacted Alaine Leopold by phone to get information about Jespy to further this investigation. And Ms. Leopold said Jespy and Mr. Kallungi had argued on multiple occasions about the relationship between Mr. Kallungi and his ex-wife, Alaine Kallungi. Ms. Leopold explained that Jespy believed the relationship between her husband and her husband's ex-wife, with whom Mr. Kallungi has a young child, is inappropriate. Ms. Leopold said that Mr. Kallungi left Jespy for an extended period to stay with his ex-wife, leaving Jespy alone in the apartment for about a week. Ms. Leopold said Jespy did not have access to transportation or food during the week, and Ms. Leopold said that Jespy threatened to report Mr. Kallungi to the police for abandoning her, and this caused Mr. Kallungi to return home a short time later. Kallungi's ex-wife lives in Colorado Springs, and Mr. Kallungi was known to see his child at least twice a week, if not more often. Ms. Leopold said that Jespy often contacted her by phone calls and text messages to talk about her ongoing marital problems. Ms. Leopold said that Mr. Kallungi and his ex-wife, Alaine Kallungi, had conversations about their relationship with each other. Ms. Leopold said Mr. Kallungi is in frequent contact with Alaine Kallungi and may have talked to her about his relationship with Jespy. Ms. Leopold said she provided screenshots taken by Jespy of an email that Mr. Kallungi sent to Alaine Kallungi. Mr. Kallungi is telling his ex-wife that he will not give his new home address. He tells Alaine, "When we have our conversations about Jespy moving here, you got quite upset, and you said you would come over and make her talk to you if she wouldn't agree to it." Later in the same email, Mr. Kallungi says, "For the record, what happened before with Jespy and to this and us this past year or so is completely wrong." Later in the email, Mr. Kallungi writes, "I have apologized for everything I did to her, and I feel terrible about it. You should be apologizing too, instead of demanding a conversation with her again. Everyone makes mistakes in life. It doesn't have to be so hard to admit. The way you act about it now makes me wonder if it was a mistake for you at all or if it was intentional." On April 4th of 2019, Mr. Kallungi contacted the manager, Cynthia Gomez, of the apartments, and he asked how to break the lease effective immediately. "I spoke to Ms. Gomez, who said that the Kallungis moved in on March 1st of 2019. Mr. Gomez said that Mr. Kallungi Ms. Gomez told Mr. Kallungi both he and Jespy were required to be present when the lease was terminated. Mr. Kallungi stated that Jespy was unavailable to come into the office because she went home. Mr. Kallungi did not specifically give a location of where Jespy's home is. It should be noted that with the assistance of an ICE agent, I later learned Jespy has no outbound activity from the United States." April 4th, 2019. "I, along with the other detectives, executed a search warrant for 1930 East LaSalle Street, number 203. And during the search of the aforementioned address, detectives saw no obvious signs of a crime scene. I noticed the lack of female clothing or other belongings that would be associated with Jespy. Detectives did find ammunition, including .30 caliber, .45 caliber, and 9mm Luger. Additionally, a .30 caliber rifle was found in the hallway closet, and a .45 ACP pistol was found in a black backpack. A 9mm weapon was not located. Jespy Kallungi was was entered into the system as a missing person on April 4th of 2019. On April 5th of 2019, I contacted Dane Kallungi by phone. I asked where Jespy was. Mr. Kallungi said he did not know. He said that Jespy met a Filipino female identified as Gina, last name unknown, at a Filipino restaurant in Colorado Springs called Julie's Kitchen. Mr. Kallungi said he did not know anything about Gina, nor did he have any contact information. Mr. Kallungi said that he and Jespy got into an argument on Wednesday, March 20th of 2019, and he said Jespy left him between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. due to the argument. It should be noted that Mr. Kallungi and Officer Mathis told Officer Mathis that Jespy left on March 27th of 2019. Mr. Kallungi said Jespy went to stay with Gina who she recently met at Julie's Kitchen in Colorado Springs, and Mr. Kallungi said that he did not follow Jespy out of the apartment and did not see her meet up with Gina. I asked Mr. Kallungi why he and Jespy argued on March 20th, and Mr. Kallungi said that he found text messages on Jespy's phone between Jespy and a person named Travis, unknown last name. Mr. Kallungi said those messages appeared to be Jespy and Travis planning to meet. Those text messages are not date stamped, and nothing further was known about Travis's identity. I asked Mr. Kallungi where he was, and Mr. Kallungi said that he was visiting his father. Through a record search, I located Mr. Kallungi's father living in California, and I asked him when he was returning to Colorado. And Mr. Kallungi said that he was planning to be in Colorado Springs Wednesday, April 10th of 2019. I asked Mr. Kallungi if he would sit down for an interview when he got back to town. Mr. Kallungi's answer was ambiguous, though he did not say no. I asked Mr. Kallungi if Jespy had a credit card or debit card in her name, and Mr. Kallungi said Jespy does have a debit card in the name of Jespy Kallungi from the U.S. bank account number unknown. On April 9th, I found Gina, who identified herself with the last name Mayette. Mayette. That's an interesting coincidence. Maya Mayette. Oh, but she's Mayette, but her name is May. Well, it's part of her name. Okay. Ms. Mayette said that she did meet Jespy at Julie's Kitchens on or about March 8th, 2019. Ms. Mayette said she started speaking to Jespy, who was there with Dane Kallungi and Dane's son, because she recognized Jespy had the same Filipino dialect. Ms. Mayette said that she did exchange phone numbers with Jespy, though she did not exchange address information with Jespy. Ms. Mayette said that the text messages that she sent to Jespy on March 17th inviting her to lunch, and Ms. Mayette says Jespy turned her down because she was busy. Ms. Mayette showed me that there were text messages and they were in a Filipino language, and Ms. Mayette translated them. Ms. Mayette said this is her only communication with Jespy since the day they met on March 8th. On April 10th, 2019, I spoke with the apartment manager, Cynthia Gomez, a second time. Ms. Gomez said Mr. Kallungi contacted her and terminated the lease that same day. Mr. Kallungi told Ms. Gomez that he might not return to Colorado for a possible time span of 2 months. Mr. Kallungi, gave a forwarding address of, and they redacted that, in Colorado Springs, which is the home of his ex-wife, Alaine Kallungi. On April 10th, 2019, with the assistance of the financial crimes detective who conducted a record search, I learned that Jespy's debit card was last used on March 20th of 2019 and posted on March 21st of 2019 for $44.99 using a Square device, I think it is. There does not appear to be any further transactions since that date. On April 15th of 2019, I spoke with Michael, I'm going to attempt that last name, who owns a small business in Colorado Springs. Dane Kallungi had been an employee of Michael's, I'm going to use Michael, for the past 4 years. Michael's business is in making pet supplies. Dane Kallungi essentially did busy work for him in deliveries. He said that Mr. Kallungi contacted him between March 18th and the 20th of 2019 to ask for some time off of work. Mr. Kallungi said that Mr. Kallungi told Michael that he needed to go to California to talk to his father and get advice about personal matters involving his relationship with Jespy. Michael was out of town on business at the time and agreed to give Mr. Kallungi the week off. Michael said that when he returned to Colorado Springs on March 24th, he was surprised to learn that Mr. Kallungi was still in California. So Michael spoke to Mr. Kallungi on April 1st of 2019 and learned that Mr. Kallungi planned to stay in California indefinitely. Michael said that Mr. Kallungi is still working for him on a part-time basis from California, and he is still in regular contact with Mr. Kallungi. He said he asked Mr. Kallungi where Jespy is, and Mr. Kallungi said that he did not know. Mr. Kallungi said that Mr. Kallungi told Michael Jespy wanted to go back to Chicago and then return to the Philippines. Michael said he didn't understand that because she seemed to be doing everything in her power to stay in the United States. Michael said a black Toyota Supra belonging to Mr. Kallungi has been parked in the lot of his business for the past 2 weeks, though Michael could give no explanation why. Michael said that Mr. Kallungi owns a second car and a motorcycle, but did not know where those vehicles were. Michael confirmed that the phone number he is currently using to contact Mr. Kallungi was, and gave that phone number, and that is not redacted. So, that's it's probably changed that phone number, I'm sure. On April 16th of 2019, I reviewed call digital records, belonging to 2 separate phone numbers registered to Dane Kallungi, one for T-Mobile and one for Sprint, and both of these phone numbers are active and being used. The call digital records show that Mr. Kallungi is in the possession of these phones and in the following mobile locations: Colorado Springs, Woodland Park, Colorado, another crime place. That's where Patrick Frazee and Kelsey Barrett. Swallowed something the wrong way. Colorado Springs, Colorado, Woodland Park, Colorado, Buena Vista, Colorado, Woodland Park, Colorado Springs, Denver International Airport, San Diego International Airport, San Diego International Airport, Denver, Colorado, Colorado Springs, and the move went through Colorado to San Diego, California, showing Mr. Kallungi driving back to California. On April 17th, Detective McLean spoke with Daniel Garcia, a co-worker who worked with Dane Kallungi, and Mr. Garcia told Detective McLean that he began working for Michael in February of 2019. Mr. Garcia was convinced that Mr. Kallungi, he convinced him to join a gym called VASA Fitness and start working out. Mr. Kallungi did join the gym, but he and Mr. Garcia did not work out together. Mr. Garcia said during the week of March 18th of 2019, Mr. Kallungi began sleeping in his car during his lunch break, even though Mr. Kallungi lived a short distance away. Mr. Garcia said that he noticed Mr. Kallungi seemed to stop eating during the week of March 25th, 2019. And Mr. Garcia said he received a text message from Mr. Kallungi on Sunday, March 30th of 2019, in which Mr. Kallungi said that he would not be going to the gym that day. Mr. Garcia said that was strange because the two did not work out together. Mr. Kallungi said that he received a second text message telling Mr. Garcia that he was going to Buena Vista to visit his mother instead, and during that conversation, Mr. Kallungi told Mr. Garcia he took Jespy as a guest to VASA Fitness on March 23, 2019 or March 24, 2019. Mr. Garcia said Jespy did a leg workout and that she had some sore muscles. Mr. Garcia arranged to meet Mr. Kallungi at their workplace, 2833 North El Paso Street, on Sunday, March 31st. The purpose was for Mr. Kallungi to train Mr. Garcia on work-related activities. When Mr. Kallungi arrived, he apologized for being late, explaining that his son fell asleep in Woodland Park, Colorado during their trip back from Buena Vista, Colorado. Mr. Garcia said that sounded odd because the trip from Buena Vista to Colorado Springs is only 3 hours. On the same day, Mr. Kallungi told Mr. Garcia that he was going to California for 1 week to visit his father. Mr. Garcia said that while he and Mr. Kallungi were still at 2833 North El Paso Street, Mr. Kallungi called his ex-wife, Alaine Kallungi, to come pick up their son because Mr. Kallungi was going back to his apartment. Detective McLean confirmed with Mr. Garcia that Mr. Kallungi's black Toyota Supra was parked in the lot at 2833 North El Paso Street. Mr. Garcia said Mr. Kallungi was driving his red Mazda on March 31st. On April 18th of 2019, I received a phone record data for, and it's redacted, the confirmed phone number registered to Jespy Kallungi. Mr. Kallungi stated Jespy left him on March 20th of 2019 between 2300 hours and 0000 hours on March 21st and took her phone with her. When subscriber data for Jespy's Verizon account was received, there was limited cell site detail. However, there are notable cell tower connections made between March 20th and March 23rd. The call detail records for Jespy's cell phone show the following. March 20th at 3:32 hours, LTE records show Jespy's cell phone connects to a cell tower in the area of 1930 East LaSalle Street, where the apartment complex is. On March 20th at 22:30 hours, her cell phone makes a 911 call and hang up. And that's the last known outgoing phone call for Jespy's cell phone. On March 21st at 22:14 hours, multiple LP connections from Jespy's cell phone to Tower 16273 show Jespy's phone in the area of Cripple Creek. That's another with the Barrett murders, right? During this period, no family or friends of Jespy have been in contact with her. There has been no reported contact with Jespy since March 20th of 2019. As stated previously, Mr. Kallungi's cell phone connected to a cell tower in the area of Woodland Park, Colorado, 3/21/19 at 21:09 hours. March 22nd, 2019 at 1:30 hours. LTE records show Jespy's cell phone connects to a tower 273 in Cripple Creek. This is only a tower connection and not a voice call. On March 23rd, Jespy's cell phone connects to a cell tower at 1930 East LaSalle Street. On March 25th at 2204 hours, the Jespy cell phone makes an IP connection to a cell tower in the area of North Academy Boulevard and North Union Boulevard in Colorado Springs, and it appears that Jespy's phone was powered on briefly and it downloaded 4 incoming messages. The content and origin of these messages is unknown. I would note Dan Kallungi's cell phone connected to a tower near the same area approximately 20 minutes after Jespy's phone powered on and received those messages. On April 19th of 2019, I went to VASA Fitness and received membership records from the staff concerning Dane Kallungi. Records show Mr. Kallungi did go to VASA Fitness on March 23rd at 17:38 hours, and he went alone. Records show Mr. Kallungi took Jespy to VASA Fitness one time only. The day Mr. Kallungi took Jespy to the fitness center was March 16, 2019 at 16:36 hours. Furthermore, records show Mr. Kallungi canceled his membership to the fitness place on April 15th of 2019. On April 19th, 2019, Alaine Kallungi came to the police operations center where she agreed to be interviewed by Detective Bishel. Ms. Kallungi told Detective Bishel that she was still in regular contact with Dane and was in contact with him earlier that same day. I'm just going to call her Alaine, okay, Alaine and Dane, because I'm not going to. Alaine said that Dane, and that rhymes, isn't that crazy, was scheduled to return from California on April 9th, 2019. I think they mean, but okay. Dane told Alaine that he flew back to Colorado 2 days early on April 7th to talk to detectives. When Dane found that his apartment had been searched, he got spooked and immediately gathered his belongings, including the 2 firearms remaining inside his apartment. Okay, and they go in the rifle, and they give the model number and a high point model and caliber pistol, and he drove back to California in his red Mazda sedan. Dane told his ex-wife he planned to stay in California. On April 21st of 2019, Daniel Fernandez, an Army sergeant stationed at Fort Carson, spoke to Officer Mowry at the CSPD Police Operations Center. Sergeant Fernandez said he had an ongoing sexual relationship with Jespy dating back to 2019, and Sergeant Fernandez told Officer Mowry that he last saw Jespy on March 15th of 2019. Sergeant Fernandez showed Officer Mowry a text message from Jespy, time-stamped Friday, March 15th, 2019, 1935 hours, giving him her address of 1930 East LaSalle Street. Sergeant Fernandez says that he picked Jespy up, then he later dropped her off at the LaSalle Street address on March 15th. Sergeant Fernandez told Officer Mowry the reason he came to the police operations center was to report what he believes as the suspicious behavior of another Army soldier at Fort Carson identified as Travis DuFour. Sergeant Fernandez said Mr. DuFour has liked numerous Facebook pictures of Jespy. Sergeant Fernandez said he contacted a friend named Skylar Beardsley on Instagram who told him that Travis DuFour was bad news and that he threatened her in the past. The nature of those threats were not described. On April 23rd, 2019, Travis DuFour came to the Police Operations Center where he was interviewed by Detective McLean, and during the interview, Mr. DuFour stated that he had an ongoing sexual relationship with Jespy for about 1 year. Mr. DuFour said Jespy was with him on March 20th of 2019, at which time the two did become intimate with each other. Mr. DuFour said that he picked Jespy up at the apartment complex at LaSalle Street on the afternoon of March 20th, 2019, and they drove to his barracks at Fort Carson. Records show that Mr. DuFour checked Jespy into his barracks at 17:21 hours on March 20th of 2019. Additionally, records show that Mr. DuFour checked Jespy out of his barracks at 21:11 hours on March 20th, 2019. Mr. DuFour said he drove Jespy straight back to the LaSalle Street apartment where he dropped her off, and Mr. DuFour said that he did not go inside Jespy's apartment. Jespy's Facebook records show messages from Jespy to Mr. Kallungi stating that Jespy was going to be at Gina's earlier on March 20th. Facts of the investigation show that Jespy was with Travis DuFour at Fort Carson during the time that Mr. Kallungi was told she would be at Gina's. This information confirms the possibility that Mr. Kallungi and Jespy were arguing about Travis on the night of Jespy's disappearance. On April 23, 2019, while reviewing data from Jespy's Verizon account, I found 2 incoming voice calls with these numbers with the Colorado Springs Police Department at 2231 and 2232, and the Colorado Springs Police Department screen documents 911 call hang up at 2230 hours on March 20th, 2019. The location of the placed call is unknown, referred to as ICEL. Due to the unknown location, so no officers were dispatched. I located an outgoing call record on Jespy's Verizon account showing Jespy's phone calling 911 at 22:29 hours on March 20th of 2019. There appears to be a 911 hang-up call and detailed by the phone company, and this appears to be the last outgoing call made on Jespy's cell phone. Alaine Kallungi identified Ronald Kallungi as the father of Dane Kallungi. Alaine's phone contact with Dane, she learned that he is currently staying with his father, Ronald. Detectives searched law enforcement databases for Ronald Kallungi and found 2 possible addresses for him. And they give the addresses. I checked cell detail records attached to Dane Kallungi and found Mr. Kallungi's phone records showed him in the same area as, and that's redacted. Detective Joins contacted the San Diego, California Police Department on April 19th of 2019 to request someone check the address for Dane Kallungi's car, a red Mazda sedan bearing Colorado license plate redacted. A patrol officer did locate Dane Kallungi's red Mazda sedan having Colorado license plate redacted, parked in close proximity to redacted. On April 26th of 2019, I traveled to San Diego, California, where I executed a search warrant on redacted. I collected cell phone records and laptop computers, among other things, belonging to Dane Kallungi from the residence. At the completion of the search, I conducted a Mirandized interview with Mr. Kallungi. And during that interview, Mr. Kallungi repeated the story that he told me on April 5th of 2019. And when I confirmed that Mr. Kallungi, when I confronted Mr. Kallungi about both Jespy's cell phone and his cell phone connecting to cell towers in the Cripple Creek area, Mr. Kallungi invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. On April 26th of 2019, Detective Bitchell spoke to Alaine Kallungi a second time regarding her past 15 years with Dane Kallungi. And during this interview, Alaine spoke of multiple incidents of domestic violence dating back to 2006, in which Mr. Kallungi strangled her. One of these incidents is documented under CSPD Call for Service from 2015. Alaine described the 2015 incident, saying Mr. Kallungi put his left hand on her throat and strangled her while pushing her into a wall. Alaine told Detective Bitchell that Mr. Kallungi strangled her 5 to 7 separate times. On more than one occasion, Alaine lost consciousness from 30 seconds to a minute. Alaine said Mr. Kallungi used 2 hands when he strangled her, unless he needed to hold her down with a free hand. Alaine described an incident when Mr. Kallungi picked her up by the hair picked her up in the air by the throat. On May 1st of 2019, Detective Bitchell interviewed Allison Myers, whose date of birth was February 3rd, 1989, the twin sister of Alaine Kallungi. And during the interview, Ms. Myers stated that she witnessed the incident in 2007 when Mr. Kallungi picked Alaine up in the air by her throat. Ms. Myers was living with Alaine and Mr. Kallungi at the time and described an argument between the two, which Mr. Kallungi blocked the doorway, preventing Alaine from leaving. Ms. Myers said the argument turned physical when Mr. Kallungi grabbed Alaine by the throat, lifted her 6 inches off the floor, and pushed her into the door jamb. Ms. Myers said Mr. Kallungi threw Alaine to the side like a rag doll after strangling her. Ms. Myers said told Detective Bitchell that she was the person Alaine called in 2015. Ms. Myers said that she immediately went to Alaine and saw the marks on her neck from being strangled by Mr. Kallungi. On March 23rd of 2021, I received a phone call from Alaine Kallungi, who told me that Dane was going to be in Colorado Springs from March 25th to March 28th of 2021 due to an illness in his family. Alaine said that Dane asked her, though, through email, if the two could get together and talk while he was in town. On March 26th of 2021, Dale Kallungi and Alaine Kallungi ate lunch together in a Colorado Springs restaurant, and during the conversation, Dane told his ex-wife that he killed Jespy Kallungi. On March 29th of 2021, Alaine Kallungi contacted me to tell me what she learned from Dane. Due to this new information, detectives arranged for Alaine to do a phone call with Dane. On April 3rd of 2021, with Elaine's consent, she engaged Dane Kallungi in a phone call, and I was present and recorded the conversation between Alaine and Dane. And during the phone call, Dane gave details about a disturbance between himself and Jespy on March 20th, 2019. Dane made the following statements. I grabbed her, and I guess it was just like a second where I got pissed off, but I didn't even feel that pissed off. It was like I just turned around and was like, shut up, and I was sick of it. And I mean, really, I was trying to like literally stop the words from coming out of her mouth for a second, and I realized that I did that for more than a second, and it looked like I did some damage, and I freaked out, and it looked like she was suffering. Yeah, that's the part I think about still. It's looking at her eyes, you know? It was like, you know, I used to think about killing terrorists, and it was like, I don't know, I don't want to kill some little girl. I wanted to kill terrorists. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I had already like killed her. It was like the stuff you see in movies about how you die. That is so not even how it happens. I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking about like what, you know, is she going to go to the hospital and like she was already dead. I mean, it was a matter of time. Like I didn't want to watch her suffer anymore, but I didn't want to keep doing that, and I was all just really, it was all just really bizarre because, I mean, it was like she was on the floor. I put her on the floor, and it was like there was still some kind of breathing going on, or even though she was gone, and I just regretted that. And no matter how much I tell myself that I didn't mean to, or that she was doing this and she was doing that, and she was like, you told me she was like basically a prostitute, and I was like, it doesn't matter, she still didn't deserve this. I don't even remember the exact details. I kind of got lost. I had her wrapped up in my car in the trunk, and I know it's like, yeah, it's freaking weird. Like sometimes I'm still going up. I can't believe I did that. And I'm like, no way I did that, but I did do that. So yeah, I drove to the Florissant area on the back road. I got lost like 4 different back roads, and then I found one where I just went down and found a spot, and I dug a hole as deep as I could. I was digging until like 3 in the morning or something because it was like all muddy and you really had to dig in some places, and I started freaking out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to start driving through then because it's not the middle of the night anymore. Yeah, she was in my trunk, and then after work I drove to Florissant, found a spot, and I just stuffed her. And hold on a second. Yeah, I went to Florissant, and no, I said goodbye to her before I put her in there and tried to apologize a million times. Okay, so then it says, in summary, information gathered during this investigation suggests that Dane Kallungi strangled Jespy Kallungi during an act of domestic violence, causing her to be severely injured. He saw that Jespy was suffering, which caused him to facilitate her death by his own hands. This incident occurred on March 20th of 2019 inside their apartment number 203 on 1930 East LaSalle Street at about 10:30 p.m. Dane Kallungi then placed Jespy Kallungi's body in his trunk of his vehicle, took his son to school the following morning, and then went to work. And after work, Dane took Jespy's body to a remote location in Teller County, where he buried her in a clandestine grave. Dane then moved to San Diego, California, avoiding cooperation with his investigation. Your affiant would respectfully request the probable cause be found that Kallungi Dan Oliver did within the city of Colorado Springs, County of El Paso, State of Colorado, commit in violation of the Colorado Revised Statutes and amended the offense murder in the first degree, Class 1 felony. And that is the affidavit. So, wow, yeah. So he did admit it to the ex-wife, what he did, and they've got it down there. So, yeah, so that'll be interesting. I'm sure he'll probably just take a plea deal on that one, but you never know. We'll definitely follow up on this case. And that's about the size of this for right now. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.